Welcome to Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, a podcast that illuminates real solutions to common problems within the parking industry. I'm your host, Brian Wolff, CEO of Parker Technology, and in each episode, I'll introduce you to real parking pros that will bring their own tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. On the show today, we have Robert Zuritsky, President and CEO of Parkway Corporation. He continues in the tradition of his father and grandfather by leading the over 100-year-old business in real estate development, acquisition, parking operations, and parking technology innovation across the United States. By 2025, Parkway will have completed $1 billion of development projects, super impressive, including the company's most recent projects, the build-to-suit office towers for Morgan Lewis and Bacchius, of course, and for Chubb Insurance Company. In addition, Robert launched Parkway's first land carry private equity fund to acquire and develop properties across the United States. Robert continues to expand Parkway's industry leadership in technological innovation and customer service excellence in real estate, parking, and airport services. Among these initiatives is the first enterprise agreement in parking to accelerate technology modernization, which has produced integrations with Google, Waze, and other global demand platforms. Robert is super active in the community as a leader. He is the chairman of the board of the National Parking Association, chairman of the board of the Philadelphia Municipal Authority, president of the Philadelphia Parking Association, chairman of the Philly Service Award. He's on the board of trustees of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I bet that's pretty cool. And a committee member for the Jewish Federation of Real Estate. He's also an active member of the past president of both the Young Presidents Organization, YPO, and Chief Executives Organization, CEO. He's got a finance degree from the University of Maryland and an MBA from Temple. Robert, welcome to Harder Than It Looks.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm not sure one of the first questions should be, how do you have time to serve on all those boards? I'm thinking about all the board meetings that I go to, and it's a lot.
It's funny. A friend of mine comments to me about that as well. And when everything is going smoothly, it's great. It's easy. But when you have a flat tire in something, it can get a little chaotic and hectic. But I'm lucky to have great teams with me and all the organizations who do most of the heavy lifting. Things, are typically running smoothly.
Yeah, that's good. I can imagine when things are running smoothly, they're running smoothly. And then when it hits the fan, then all bets are off. Okay. One of the things that I like to do, and this should be good because you've got a lot of history to talk about, a lot of legacy with Parkway and personally, is I like to hand the mic to the guest. And you've been in parking all your life, but I go back as far as you want to go and tell us your story. Tell us, obviously, the Zuritsky family and how they got into parking for that matter, and then just bring us up to the modern day, if you will. You can take as much time as you want because it's your show.
I'm third generation in the parking business. My grandparents started the company. My grandfather I don't think he graduated the 8th grade. He went out and needed to work. And he was an interesting entrepreneur. He got into all sorts of different businesses. One time he was in the film business and he had rights to some Disney movies locally and things like that. And his mother said, there's no future in the movie business. And after that, and he got into the parking business through his brothers. And he realized that he really didn't like working with his brothers, but he really liked the parking business. And they, like most family parking businesses, leased a property here and there, and then bought a property, and then luckily got the bug for buying real estate and doing things with it, because that really has been a really nice parallel business for us. My father, Joe Zuritsky, then went to college and law school, was the first in the family to go to law school, and didn't want to practice, but brought what he learned to the parking industry, was able to really build great relationships with real estate owners. We're a very small parking company then, but he was able to convince some of the larger developers to give us a shot. And we would come in with our team and we created some of our own technology, fee computers. We used video to record the transactions and then audit, and you get a perfect count of cars. And our results were amazing. We would increase revenue at an existing garage 50% in the first year, 100%, 200% in the first year. And the owners were like flabbergasted. They would take us to other projects, and then they would take us across the country to other deals that they were doing. And we would have similar results in those in Denver and California and Cleveland. And that we were growing with the parking. And at the same time, we were also doing things with real estate. Back in the 70s, let's say in the 80s, there wasn't too much development activity in cities other than a little bit of parking. You could build parking lots, you could build garages with some retail, with a little bit of office. And we started to do that by ourselves or with other partners. And then the parking management side changed. Central parking changed the management industry in the country, because they would come in and basically, we thought, manage for nothing. And they would make dollars in other areas than the management fee. So we pivoted a bit, and we pivoted more towards the real estate side. And I went to University of Maryland and then later at Temple University for a graduate degree in finance and business. Anyway, we were doing both parking and real estate. And we're more and more getting into the real estate side of the industry. You mentioned some of the developments we're doing. We're finishing the Chubb Center in Philadelphia, which is a 550,000 square foot building. It's the biggest development we have done in-house. So we've been involved with bigger developments, but never with Parkway managing it from start to finish.
Okay.
And, but the parking side, we still love. We manage most of the stuff we manage is we either own or we're part owner of. We still have some legacy management deals with friends. And we're also, as you mentioned, the equity fund, we started during the pandemic. We really thought there was going to be a tremendous amount of distress in real estate because there was no revenue coming in from parking. So we raised our first equity fund, and we're just about closing that fund now. We have 3 or 4 more deals to close it in the next couple of months. And we're now working on the second fund. And that's very interesting because real estate is so stressed now. With the stress that we thought we were going to see in the pandemic is really hitting now on developers and landowners. That's very exciting. Development is hard now. It's almost impossible to get started because lenders are not lending and the interest rates and costs are too high. But we're working on a couple of development potential deals that could happen. And we're working with our friends across the country in the parking industry to buy and manage these parking facilities across the country.
Yeah. So the land, what is it? The
land carry fund, meaning it's carried on the parking value, the parking lots. Yeah.
But it seemed to me that the land carry fund is really a leaping point from what you discovered, where you built the Morgan Lewis building and then the Chubb building. Those were originally lots that Parkway owned. Is that right?
Let me think. Yeah, we did 4 developments in the last 7 years: a hotel, an apartment building, and 2 build-to-suit office buildings. All 4 were on parking facilities that we had owned. Some of them we had owned for, let me think about that. Those were not really long holds. Some of them were 8 or 9 years, which is not a long time to own the properties. Some might be, actually the Morgan Lewis building was the first property I bought out of college. So that one was a 30-year hold. What you do is you're buying the property. Parkway bought it, let's say 25 years ago, and then we would assemble more properties next to it. And then you have a site that's big enough to do something major. And then you have to go out and convince a tenant to make it their home for 20 plus years.
Yep.
Which is a very interesting process if you think about it, that somebody is going to commit to you. You can't see it. You can't touch the building.
Yeah.
And they're going to put their trust in you to build them a 3,000 square foot building to be their home. That's especially now with office space. It's so in flux. People, what is office space anymore? Meanwhile, the Morgan Lewis building is, I would argue, is the nicest building in office building, maybe in the state. It is the Four Seasons of office space.
Yeah.
And their law firm is the 9th largest law firm in the world. And they are trying to attract the best in the world to work for them. And when you put it that way, their hires that they bring in, they're paying them salaries of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they're investing $400,000 or $500,000 into a candidate to come and work for them.
Yeah.
So the office space is probably the cheapest part of that training and all the work you put into people. So it's actually a small investment, but in today's world with office, it's a gigantic investment. So it's interesting. Real estate is a very interesting world now.
I've spent some time with you, and it is obvious that the real estate is what gets your juices flowing. Of course, parking is important because, as you described to me, this has probably been a couple of years ago, it makes perfect sense. So you build these relationships with these building owners, and they have this parking asset, and they're like, well, I don't know what to do with this. And you're like, let me help you with that. And then you end up being partners with them. And it just made perfect sense that you could do what you did and they did what they did. And as it turns out, then it gave you an opportunity to springboard into other relationships that were even bigger. I love the stories. So what I would like to do, so the land carry, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I would like to understand how you managed the transition, because I've met your father and your father had a presence in Philadelphia. So I want to know how you managed the transition when you took over from your father at Parkway and what that looked like, and what were the bumps in the road, or what were the good parts and the bad parts of that transition?
My father is still very active, and he's still a very big presence in Philadelphia and beyond. So I became, I think, president in 2001 after I graduated from graduate school. I went back to school for another second degree. Working in a family business has its advantages and challenges, and there's plenty of bumps in the road. I have a lot of friends who are in family businesses, and it works well when I think everyone has the same philosophy about life, about investing, about things. And my father and my sister, Anna Bonas, who's really I'm running the company with now. We have the same viewpoints on the world, on charity, on community, on investing for the future, not just taking everything out of the companies and the real estate. That's the reason it works. And also both having a work ethic that you're thinking about the business all the time. And so that's how it's been successful. It doesn't mean that there's not flat tires and bumps and things.
Sure.
But that's how we are 102 years old. We only discovered that we weren't sure how old we were. This is funny. My sister we thought we were like in the 90s. This was a while ago and my sister found something that we were incorporated in the parking business that made us another 10 years like older, which was funny, but it works very well. We up the responsibilities. My sister is handling the asset management side, the accounting and the claims management and HR, and I'm doing the parking and the real estate and some of the investing stuff. And you work at it, right? Yeah. And we're thinking about the fourth generation and we're working at it. There wasn't really a plan when I came in with my sister. The company was a different company in many ways. But now we're working hard at it to make sure it's right for everybody. If it is right for everybody. Yeah.
Yep. No, that's good. Okay. So I would imagine when you started, you were probably in the garages early on at 13 or 14 years old. Tell us about how that experience shaped your leadership style today, having been in the trenches with all of your managers and your frontline folks.
Yeah, I did grow up in the business. I would come in on off days from school, or I would work on the weekends. My friends would work in the business. They would come in. That was it was smart to have that experience because you really saw what it took to be successful
Yep.
sweeping the parking lots and directing traffic, dealing with the angry customers and getting the full experience of what everybody did. So that was a good thing. And then I grew into the business with management and different levels of management and different levels of parking facilities, which I would recommend and a lot of family businesses that I know, and the Hatfields and the Douglases, and that a lot of the families that have been in the business, they did that either with their companies to start, but then they would go work for friendly companies across the country, which I thought was terrific experience. These days, what we're trying to do with our fourth generation is to have them work outside the company and get experience as a lawyer in real estate firms or other areas, so they can maybe bring some of that knowledge, but not just come straight in, because it's just good to see what it means to work in a non-family business or a different business.
That makes perfect sense. Let them go experience the world. And then maybe they can come back and bring some of that experience with them. A little cross-pollination. Yeah, that's good. All right. So let's talk a little bit of a transition here to 4 or 5 years ago. You took Parkway Corporation in a bit of a strategic position around standardizing on a single platform. I would like to hear your thought process behind that, because I think everybody that's listening to this podcast has probably contemplated that at one time, but it's really hard to do, especially for a private operator that has so many different mixed assets and so many different pieces of equipment in their garage. So take me through the thought process and how you got it done.
Sure. We actually had done it a couple of times beforehand. There was a company that we met at the convention. It was a German guy, and he had a company he created called Parkshow, which was a really cool system. It used a plastic coin instead of a ticket, and you could pay with credit card in, credit card out. The ticket transactions were done with these reusable chips. And we love this. It was a very inexpensive system. And we went enterprise wide with assets that we controlled. We went in with that. And unfortunately, they were not really ready for prime time. And they just did not have all of the servicing, the backup, and the manuals and everything that you needed to sustain it. So I think we went with Amano next. So we've done this a couple of different times.
Okay.
Amano, we found their system was good, but they had one company built the hardware, another company was building the software, and then you had the third company was the installer. So you had 3 different areas they were conflicting with each other when there was issues, who did what. And so that was an interesting experience. Then we went with another company for a while. And anyway, we met Flash Parking. It was probably a little bit more than 5 years ago, and really was intrigued by their system because it was all cloud-based. They didn't have to have servers locally, which was really intriguing. And then the screens that they had, they really were a bit ahead of their time. That's been the LPR to get the transactions to move quicker and being able to use apps, all different types of apps. So their system was terrific. And we went all in with them, and they have been able to grow and evolve because they can easily upgrade their software. And that was another big investment for us. We have an advantage in that we own either wholly partners with a lot of the parking that we manage.
Yep.
So we can either just make the decision to change out systems, or we can recommend it. And that's an advantage that we have. It's hard for operators to go system wide, or mostly one system wide, because they're typically managing so many different types of systems.
Yeah.
That has worked out very well for us.
So any lessons learned as you rolled that thing out?
No, we have a really good team. We have a couple of individuals that their most of their job is to oversee the installation and then the service and the coordination with Flash or T2. And so you need to have, you need to invest in some people that really understand the systems, because when we hear about other companies putting in the same systems or different systems, there's a lot to do before they're installed to get the systems in so that they work that day.
Yeah.
And not have trouble for weeks to try to figure things out. So the installation side and the planning of it
Yeah. If I've heard anything that's consistently over the 9 years that I've been in the industry, it is local support matters. And you've got to have people that can really understand the system and understand how it relates to your parking operation, because everyone's just a little bit different. So you got to have people that either on your staff or on the other side that knows your business enough to help you actually configure the system to make it work.
That's another good point, Brian. We have some of the most complicated parking garages in the country. One of our garages, maybe there's 3 different hotel valets that run through it. There's a market that is one of the busiest markets in the country with 86 different vendors. Then they all have a validation system that had to be worked out. We have the criminal justice center across the street, and they have monthlies and they have other types of deals. And then you have the convention center, which has events, and we could have 15 different rate schedules in one building, one garage, and all sorts of different deals to manage. And Flash has been able to absorb those systems. And I like a lot of the gateless systems, and we use some of them on our facilities. But I don't think we couldn't go gateless, I don't think, at some of our garages because of the different demand generators and customers that we have be giving up just too much control. So it's interesting. It's an interesting industry.
For sure. I think, again, if there's a constant theme that's coming out around gateless and all of the excitement about it, it has a time and a place for sure. But I'm sure you can't imagine going uncontrolled near the convention center or in this garage that you were just talking about. It would be mass hysteria. It's crazy.
It just wouldn't work. You would give up too much and you wouldn't be able to manage these different groups coming in, these hotel valet companies where you need to get real counts for them.
Yep.
And there'd just be so many games, I think, that would be played there.
So that is a perfect lead in to the second big chunk that I want to talk about. And that is, what are we going to do to help John Q. Public understand what you just said about handling 4 or 5 or 6 different validations? To them, they are one validation, right? And they're like, why can't you get it right, Rob? It's just parking. And so I know I could imagine at the NPA, they're probably talking about it, but I'd love to have a little discussion right now about how we can get a little public support for the parking professionals in the United States.
This is really one of the main thrusts or efforts that I want to have in the next 2 years while I'm chairman of the NPA, National Parking Association, I think is a 10-year effort, by the way, to change the image of our industry. If there was no parking in the country, the entire economy would shut down. Part of the transportation infrastructure for the country. We help to get cars off the street. We help with congestion. We don't hurt congestion. We are basically the gas stations of the future with EV charging. And we are leading the league with more environmentally friendly lighting and ticketless gates and app transactions and all of these wonderful things. And no one knows about that. And there are politicians, there are environmental groups, there are different groups that like to vilify us because they can then raise taxes on us, or they can regulate us, or they can do different things to us. And we have not been effective in explaining who we are and that we're important to this country and to the world. So my goal is to start this effort to improve our image. And I think we can do this through a couple of different areas. One is just to have a strategy for spreading true stories about us. There's a lot of good stuff about us right now. First of all, we're a very hot industry. There's a lot of private equity coming into our industry. There's a ton of technological advancements. I say we've come like 50 years in the last 5 years or so with technology and advancements. So there's good stories about us. And all we need to do is be a little bit organized and start to echo that. And Donald Shoup passed away. He was a professor at one of the universities on the West Coast. And he wrote a book about the dangers of free parking, which he was trying to explain that if you make parking too available and too cheap, you create bad habits. And there's a bit there to go into. But I agree with that. I think that if anything, we've probably built more parking than we need. And we've hurt ourselves in that, let's say developers, I'm a developer. And if I'm forced to build water fountains in every single office, you don't have to do that. But if you're supposed to build a parking space for every office or 2 parking spaces for every desk or something. And that's overkill. Those are parking minimums for office, for apartments, for hotels. You don't need that many. And at the same time, so that's a message that I would like to put out, that we agree with city planners that parking minimums are not necessary. At the same time, I would also echo that don't make it impossible for developers to to replace parking in their developments if they need to or they want to. And what the cities are doing is now they're getting rid of parking minimums, which I would agree with, but some cities are so restrictive with parking. Their taxation is so restrictive and their regulations and other things that it's impossible to build a single parking space back in for the public. And if as a developer, if it costs me $3,000 a year to build a parking, to pay the mortgage and lose $3,000 a year on a parking space, I'm not going to do that. And that's not smart. You want the market to be able to determine what is needed with parking. You don't want to force too much parking, but you also don't want to restrict it so it can never be built again. So that's a position paper that I hope that we're going to be publishing very shortly. And over the next 10 years, if we are publishing things that make sense, we're echoing advancements in our industry, like with your company. You guys have done an amazing job with the technology and the customer service and the efficiencies with those things. These are good stories. These are people in our industry. There's great stories in art. People have made careers. They put their kids through college. There's so many good stories about us, but we don't do a good job sharing them. So if we get out there with the good stories and the advancements and statistics about our industry, then when there are issues that come up or there are opportunities that come up, we're at the table, right? That's what we need to be. We need to be able to comment on when legislation. We need to be able to be involved with city planning. So our industry has a voice and we are able to protect ourselves and benefit society going forward.
Yeah, it just dawned on me. I think you remember the Got Milk commercials? I think the milk was declining. I remember I'm making this story up, but I think I'm going to be close, right? So milk consumption was declining. And so this milk lobby or this association started putting out these commercials called Got Milk, and it actually drove it up. And so even as you were saying that and you were talking about the positive stories, I bet it would take some, right? It's going to be I agree it's a 10-year effort, but if we start publishing some of the stories in parking, I think we might actually be able to turn it around.
And if we echo it through our own industry, we don't even have to spend that much money on this, but the social media, my company uses it to improve the image of our company, and it doesn't cost anything. You're putting up little stories and little content. Our reach in just our industry with just our members in the association, or if we teamed up with the IPMI and PI, we can reach 1 million people with one article in an hour. And so that's one of the efforts that we're going to be launching this year. We're going to be doing a couple of position papers. I'm hoping we're going to do a survey on the congestion pricing in New York, and then some updated research about our industry. And we just continue that over the next couple years, and people will take notice and look to us for our opinions.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
my puppy.
Yeah, that's all right. That makes us real. That makes us human. We're not droids talking on the screen. Okay, so clearly changing public opinion. I think earlier when we were talking before we were on air, you said that NPA is looking at hiring a lobbyist, or are we like trying to get a lobby? And I don't want to put words in yours or Christine's mouth, but is there a lobbying effort going on, or thoughts around it?
Lobbying, I think there are issues facing our industry right now that we need to voice, to have a voice.
Yep.
Lobbying is a little different. Lobbying, I think, is going to be done on a local effort. There's not much you can do on a national scale for lobbying. There's not too many things that affect us on a national scale, but locally there can be. And how the NPA can play into this is advocating and raising our voice. That is where I think we can have a direct impact over time. Again, putting out position papers also can help, because if there's an issue, there are issues that are out there right now that our industry is dealing with. And I would like to put out a position paper on one of those pieces where it's best practices, right? Where we're saying that this is the NPA's a range of fees that we should be charging. This is how many strikes you should give for a violator, somebody who's not paying for parking. And there should be, you don't want to just hit them with a booting or towing in the first violation. There's certain things that we can do as an industry that we just put out best practices. And then when there's a rogue operator that is way outside the spectrum of this kind of guardrails, that it's, the industry's here. And then you go, okay, there's going to be bad actors, but that's not really how government should work with the operators, and operators should work with the public. So there's a range of costs and fees that are acceptable.
Reasonable and customary.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay. So then is there anything else? Give us a peek behind the curtain at NPA besides sort of these big chunks. What else is in your mission here for the next 2 years as the chairman of NPA?
That's pretty much it. We have an amazing organization. There's a great board of directors and an executive committee, really, really great people. I've been involved for many years, and we've got good companies and really great people. And I think the NPA does a great job with education and with networking and doing business. And this is just another, and now we're doing more research. So it's research, advocacy, and networking. Those things we're doing, very well. Christine and Jenny over there are some dynamos, and the rest of the team is terrific.
Yeah, just continuing to drive the mission of parking is important. Pay attention. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the land, the fund that you got off the ground. Is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to hear about the new fund that you're trying to put together? Because it sounds like you fully invested with Fund 1. Now you're on to Fund 2. What's cooking?
It's a tough time for real estate developers. So we're seeing more and more deal flow now, which is great. We're working with about a dozen parking companies that are our friends across the country. They are able to invest dollars into properties. Some of them have invested actually in the overall fund, and it's working very well. I'm optimistic about this effort, even though, again, real estate is bad.
Yeah.
All forms of real estate, even if they're performing super well, are troubled because interest rates were 3% and 4%, and now they're, who knows, 7, 8, 9, or, can't get loans. So it's a good time. It's a good time to buy. And parking has recovered to a large extent. There are exceptions. There are markets that are still suffering in the country, but many have recovered. And I think there is back to office a movement to come back up. We continue to see improvement in most of our cities, but there are challenges for sure.
Yeah. So it definitely feels like there's a movement to get people back to the office. I do think I'm sitting in the upper deck at this point, but I do think 5 days a week might be a little optimistic. I think we're going to have to find some flexibility there. I think that flexibility is going to live forever, frankly, because I think that's just reflective of the times.
I agree. I'm home today and I've 4 or 5 meetings and I'm productive. I'm working here. My office we're back for 4 days. A lot of our people are in 5 days a week. The parking people and the real estate people, they're in every day. But I agree. I think having flexibility, the systems we have now are amazing to be able to do all this stuff.
Yep. I think the technology has enabled us to be really flexible and to be effective when we're not in the office. Although there is no substitute for a water cooler moment. I'm sorry.
I agree. It's
the way it works.
You have to have that. You give that up. All of my business dealings are being at parties or, being on the board of this or that. And the moment after the meeting's over, when you're catching up, that's when you're doing business. It's not so much on the phone or on Zoom.
Yeah, it's tough. All right. So we've gotten to the point where I want to transition into the lightning round, and hopefully you've listened to a couple of my podcasts, so I won't stump you on any of these questions. First one is, what phrase are you known for? So if someone utters a phrase down the hall, they know it originated on Rob Zuritsky's desk.
Well, you know what? I'm not familiar with. It's lightning round.
Okay, good. All right.
Well, I can't think of something. I wish I had seen that one. I can't think of anything there. Yeah, so I'll think of it later.
Yeah. So somebody walks in and they go, "Oh God, here, that's what Rob." Yeah. All right. So I'll come back to that one.
Sorry about that one. Yeah.
No, it's all right. Anyway, I was going to go into why it's important to me because I've got a million phrases, and unfortunately, they're building stickers out of yours, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's got a phrase. Okay. So question number 2 then is, what's the hardest thing you've ever done in life? Not parking, in life.
Hardest thing I've ever done in life. Oh my gosh.
The hardest thing to do in your life, not that I'm leading the witness here, but I would imagine losing your mom was probably pretty hard.
Yeah, we just lost Caroline's father a couple months ago. There's so much. I'm 60, so there's so much of that my friends and will be dealing with now, and that stinks.
It does indeed. It really does.
Yeah, it is tough, but. Yeah,
that is life. And
okay.
We got to keep going, and we're living for our kids, and your kids are growing up fast, and the house is still standing after the Super Bowl party, which is a victory for you. That's all right. So what's the hardest thing about your parking job?
Our hardest thing is dealing with troubled accounts that you execute perfectly on a deal, and there is just no easy or any solution to problems. We have an office building that's 97% full, and we executed as we had planned, and it's hurting because all office buildings are hurting. So you're just dealing with those impossible situations that confront us now a lot.
Conundrums, as it were.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. If you could wave your magic wand and fix anything in parking, what would it be?
No, it's easy. The taxes in some of the cities that we're in are so outrageously high. And this is an effort that I've been dealing with forever. It would fair taxation in our cities.
Yeah. I remember you sharing the numbers with me. It's staggering in Philly. For sure. Yeah. Okay. When you're not parking cars, what do you do for fun?
Riding bikes, or I like playing poker with my friends. Yeah. Tennis sometimes.
You like winning Super Bowls?
Yeah, that's the best. That's the best treat. Eagles had a stellar season, and beating KC at the end, that's a tough team to beat, but that was a great game.
It was a great game, and sorry, Heidi, I'm on the Eagles side here. I have to tell you that the Kansas City looked formidable for the year 3, and I was happy to see that the Birds got it done. Nobody should win 3 in a row, unless it's my team, the Colts. All right. So last question. What are you most proud of?
My family. I'm most proud of my kids doing well. My wife and I are doing well, and my dad is healthy. My sisters and their families are well, and my brother-in-laws. I'm blessed right now with a good situation. So I'm most happy about that.
That's great. I shouldn't have passed by it. I shouldn't have run the stop sign so quickly when I asked you about transition, and the fact that you and your sister settled in with your father still involved says a lot probably about your family, about your father, and obviously your mother. We lost your mother a couple of years ago, so I'm sorry for that. But it says a lot about how close you've been as a family, for sure, because I think there are probably third generations that aren't telling smooth transition stories. So you should be proud of that, you and your sister and your dad, for sure.
They say it's 1% of the family businesses get to third generation because third generation usually screws it up or something. There's so many things that happen in business every week, every year. Now there's so much uncertainty in the economy, and there's so many things that can happen to a family and the business that can make it impossible. So we're doing well, and we'll see what the future holds.
All right. That's great. You want to circle back on what you're known for? There has to be, Rob Zuritsky has to have a phrase, right? Like
phrase.
Let's keep going.
Well, give me one of your phrases.
Yeah. So mine is let's keep going, or experiments never fail, which isn't original, but they know that when they hear it from me. So I could imagine Rob is probably, so let me try and channel my best Rob Zuritsky. You'll be like, let's just try it. Like that would be, I could see that being a Rob Zuritsky phrase. Let's just try it.
I'm a collaborator, a management style so I'm not a dictator. But we do try a lot of new things, but I can't think of a phrase that I need to develop one.
You do. Or I should have texted RJ before we started this.
Let's play more.
He'll probably know. We'll just dub it in.
Let me make one last pitch for the NPA. So we have our convention coming up in the fall, and Perry Griffith III is going to be the chair of that, and in Indianapolis, which I think is going to be an outstanding convention. So we invite everybody to attend. And I think we just had a great conference. Was it last month? And great education and always great networking. So hopefully you'll see it in Indianapolis. I think it's in September. So
for sure, let's make a big push to get everyone to Indianapolis for NPA. Listen, Indianapolis knows how to throw a great party. I know that firsthand. So let's do that for sure. So I appreciate that. If somebody wants to try and get a hold of you, Rob, how would they find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn, or just shoot me an email at the company, and love to chat. We love starting new relationships with companies, developers, or parking operators, or acquirers. We're working with a host of different groups now, and we've got partnerships that date back 40, maybe 50 years, but 40 years at least. And we've been involved, I think, with 46 different joint venture arrangements with real estate, or with technology companies, or with other types of companies. And so we're love to work with. We've done a lot of business through the National Parking Association, starting with All Right Parking in the 70s, Kinney Parking maybe in the 80s or 90s, and so many different companies.
Yeah. So Parkway Corporation's open for business.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep. Looking to do more.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming on the show. And I look forward to seeing you, if not before, certainly in September at NPA, but I have a feeling I'm going to see you sooner.
Great.
Thanks, Rob. That's a wrap on this episode of Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, presented by Parker Technology. Please leave us a review if you liked what you heard. Make sure you tune in next month as we continue to uncover tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. Bye for now.